Hi, everybody. This is Lama Justin, and welcome to Mahamudra for the People. Um, and for those who are new, and it looks like there are a couple of people who are a little new. Welcome. Uh, it's really nice to have everyone here together on this Friday afternoon to engage in some practice and some study and some kind of reflection on the practice of Mahamudra. Um, so for those who are new, and then for those who are seasoned here, I guess we can take this as a bit of a reminder. We'll be starting the session off with some practice. And so the practice itself is somewhat basic in the sense of using, like we do with shamatha, different kinds of anchors. So an anchor or a hook, a way to place the mind using either our breath, so maintaining mindfulness or awareness of every inhalation and exhalation that arises, or using an object, a physical object within the frame of our visual reference, or using a visualized object that could take the form of a Buddha image, for example, perhaps right on the crown of your head, or a tigle, a dot, a bindu, either in one's brow or at one's navel, or using the experience of mind itself as the anchor. So we're going to do this just gently for about 10 minutes. And I'll let you know when that time is up. So allow yourself to settle naturally into the practice of Mahamudra. And part of the settling into the practice of Mahamudra is the practice of letting go of the past. So beginning to cultivate the experience of mind where all the proclivities around what has occurred either a minute ago, 5 minutes ago, yesterday, 4 years ago, etc., is something we can let go of. So similarly, letting go of any expectation around the future. Oh, if I, practice this, I'll become awakened, and that means blah 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 blah. So trying to put that down, or it's Friday, so how am I going to spend my evening, or what am I going to do over the weekend, or what's Thanksgiving going to be like? Just allowing all of that to kind of settle. And then at the same time, trying to let go of any particular idea with respect to what this present moment is. Just letting things happen. And then gently letting go of there being a need to do anything or the need to analyze. We'll allow ourselves to just rest into this basic experience. This experience of this moment. Pain, that's what my anchor is. My anchor is mind itself. So I just allow myself to settle into the experience of mind as it is. And we'll do this for 10 minutes. And so gently bring yourself back to this virtual group. And before we go any further, this is a point of trying to cultivate intention, try and bring to your awareness, to your sense of the moment right now, an understanding of everything that came together in your life to bring you to this session today. So everything in your life that led you to take interest in meditation, everything within the context of your experience with meditation that led you to connect with the Dharma path, everything within your practice life that brought your Dharma path to Bhumi Sparsha, and then everything, the whole totality of family history, family lineage, kind of the extraordinary mathematics behind all of that coming into place. So it's actually quite rare to be able to be in this position. And take a little bit of time to celebrate that, right? And to really celebrate with ease and joy and self-care, coming into direct relationship with Dharma, and how that makes you feel. So, I believe in the last meeting, last week, on Mahamudra for the People, we finished this song by Shabkar, called The Jewel of the Heart, a mind teaching. And so I would like to return to Flight of the Garuda itself, to song number 14. And this will be, I think, a little fun. So, you know, these texts can get a little heady sometimes. The practice of Mahamudra is you know, an incredible practice, and like any kind of meditation practice, focus around engaging in effort and concentration is important. And what we're going to look at is bringing kind of something a little different, using our senses a little bit more. So what I've been doing, for those who are completely new, is I will recite one of these songs by Shabkar, and then we'll kind of go through it bit by bit, and people can ask questions. You can ask questions by clicking the Ask a Question tab at the bottom of the page, or you can just write your question into the text box. And thank you, Melissa, for pointing out how people can get the previous recordings, the archived recordings of the session or this series. So again, it's Friday, and Friday I'm usually kind of zonked, so excuse me if I feel or look freakish in my exhaustion. So if you can allow yourself to sit as comfortably as you can, take some time to settle yourself into this present moment, and just listen gently as I recite this, and allow the sounds to hit your eardrum, and then whatever reaction to arise from that point. Oh yes, yeah. Yeah, so the book is The Flight of the Garuda. And so this is a collection of songs by Shabkar. And Shabkar was a great Nyingma yogi who lived in Tibet, I believe in the 1800s. He's very well known, very famous as a practitioner, and then also as a vegetarian. And he wrote rather beautifully about his practice of both Mahamudra and Dzogchen or Ati Yoga. And so Flight of the Garuda is really a profound way of being able to explore nature of mind practices. Nature of mind practices are called nature of mind practice because they bring us into direct experience of mind itself. And so sometimes that's direct, the initial direct experience of kind of more limited experience of mind. So kind of the mind of distraction. And then, of course, over time, through becoming more familiarized with the experience of mind, then this practice deepens to really get to the root of what it means to be. So hopefully that's helpful, and welcome, Shane. So song number 14 begins, Emaho. Listen once again, heart children. Wrap something smooth like cloth around your body and observe your mind that thinks, how soft. Now cover your body with something rough like yak's wool and observe the mind that thinks, how rough. When observed, they are both the same taste in being empty. Look at a beautiful form such as a golden statue and observe your mind that thinks, how lovely. Then look at a repulsive form like a toad and observe your mind that thinks, how ugly. When observed, they are both the same taste in being empty. Put something delicious like molasses in your mouth and observe your mind that thinks, how sweet. When tasting something bitter like ginger, observe your mind that thinks, how bitter. When observed, they are both the same taste in being empty. Smell something fragrant like sandalwood incense and observe your mind that thinks, how sweet smelling. Now imagine something rank like the asafoetida plant or garlic and observe your mind that thinks, how foul. When observed, they are both the same taste in being empty. Listen to the music of the bell, sitar, or flute, and observe your mind that thinks, how melodious. Now listen to the sounds of stones or hands clapping together, and observe the mind that thinks, how harsh. When observed, they are both the same taste in being empty. Imagine that you were born a universal monarch who is ruling an empire of 4 continents. You are surrounded by an entourage of many queens and ministers, residing in a palace made of the 5 precious substances and partaking in food of 100 different flavors. When these scenes arise in your mind, observe your mind that thinks, "How delightful." Next, imagine that you're a destitute beggar without a single attendant, lying in an earthen barn which has fallen into ruins, where the rain drips from above and moisture seeps in from the earth below. You suffer, tormented by many kinds of misery, afflicted with numerous diseases like leprosy that causes your hands and feet to fall off. When these scenes arise in your mind, observe the mind that thinks, "How awful." When observed, both pleasure and pain are of the same taste in being empty. Having thus recognized the 6 sense perceptions to be emptiness, it is henceforth not necessary to analyze according to the examples mentioned above. Since the sense perceptions are groundless, primordially free and empty, when one of them arises, good or bad, relax naturally without chasing after it in the moment it arises, and rest in the state of mind itself. Without a doubt, it is spontaneously freed. This was the song which indicates how to spontaneously free the 6 sense perceptions. So, why this song? Why this song now? There's it's clear sometimes that we don't always see things eye to eye, right? The same way. A kind of an interesting example to me, at least, is yesterday an article came out in Time magazine about kind of the work that I work for New York City Department of Correction, the work that we do on Hart Island, the city's Potter's Field. And it's complex. It's a complex place. Potter's Fields are scary because that's where people who are indigent or people who are forgotten or people who don't have means or people for whom their families after their death say, you know what, like, we don't want to have anything to do with that guy anymore. We're not even going to deal with the burial. And they end up being buried in the city cemetery. And I posted the article itself on Facebook, on my Facebook page, and someone wrote a very long kind of critical kind of response to the article, which is totally fine, and yet at the same time, it was clear that they were very disturbed by the article, and I found the article really interesting. And so this kind of piece of how one thing to one person can be pleasurable and to another person it can be displeasurable kind of came up, or at least in my mind. And there are a lot of different teachings, in the Buddhist tradition about that kind of thing, how different aspects of appearance can be related to differently by people. And so, in one way, sometimes it's described that water, for example, like fresh water, can be a home to fish. And then for us as humans, it's not a home because we can't breathe underwater, but it's something that we need to be able to drink in order to stay hydrated, in order to stay alive and have our organs function. Right, so there's one object, fresh water, and many different kinds of relationships we can have to that fresh water. And Shabkar in this song is kind of getting to two things. I mean, one, he's pointing out the fact that all sense perception is basically of the same taste, right? That which is pleasurable to touch or displeasurable to touch is basically the same. And what's pleasurable to hear and what's displeasurable to hear is basically the same, right? It's just sound. Everything that we consume, there's part of us that find that which we enjoy to consume joyful, whereas somebody else might find that completely disgusting. And so the question then becomes, what is that causal factor that allows there to be difference, and then also allows there to be the possibility of freedom from the ways that we kind of judge, or project onto objects, right? So a hunk of beef for one person might make them cry if they see it, because they see flesh, and flesh must have been, taken from somewhere, from an animal, right? Animal or human. And then for another person, that hunk of flesh is food. For another person, that hunk of flesh may be something else. Sustenance for, So, and later on, Shabkar goes into the fact that, without chasing, the experience that arises as a result of something being introduced into our experience, when we stop chasing, then all things are able to be seen in a relatively unified fashion. So in the past, we've discussed the fact that everything that arises in this particular moment is a combination of things like light and color, forms of different kind. And then when we're able to put down all of the value judgments, we can experience whatever it is that's red in our field of reference as just pure red. Whatever is black is pure black. Whatever is white is pure white, or blue, etc. And then when we begin to look a little bit more deeply, sometimes we can have these little flashes of experience or insight in which we're able to recognize that all that we interact with, right, in terms of appearance, like all of this right in front of us, is the constant play of form, light, sound, texture, taste, aroma. And as we're moving through space that's completely inhabited by these forms, we tend to run this way and that in order to get to the form that's the most pleasurable, or in order to get to the food that's most tasty, or food that aligns with our ethics around sourcing food. Or other aspects of appearance. Is something peaceful or is it wrathful? And depending upon our predilection for either experiencing or only wanting to experience that which is peaceful, we end up pushing away that which is not peaceful, right? That which is wrathful, or that which is hard or challenging. And so Shabkar is pointing out to us that much of our likes and dislikes, all of that preference, is kind of, for lack of a better term, like skin deep. Our preference with respect to appearance is very surface. Right? I don't like red, I like blue. Black is a negative color. Sometimes you hear that. And you see that sometimes in some cultural renderings of colors. So, when Shabkar says, wrap something smooth like cloth around your body and observe your mind that thinks, how soft. Right? And everything that comes with softness. If we were to just try and do that, I don't have anything particularly soft near me right now. But if you just imagine holding up a rabbit, assuming you're not allergic to rabbits, to your face, right? Or to your arm, or to your hand, right? Or petting a cat. How do we allow ourselves to just experience that without kind of like tripping the cycle of judgments? Oh, so nice. But what if we're allergic to cats, right? Oh, no, actually, that's not so nice. I much prefer touching this other thing. Or something rough, like, sandpaper, or holding a piece of a big chunk of rusty metal. So it's rusty, it's kind of, worn, and in some places a little sharp, pokey. Or somebody putting a pineapple in your hand versus putting an apple in your hand. Right? So the direct experience of feeling is one thing, right? So that direct experience of feeling is a way of being in relationship and a form of awareness. But then all of the storylines around, that seems like that smells, or that looks very messy, I'm not going to touch it. Right? Is this kind of coming back into this place of preference? And Shabkar's kind of like pushing us incrementally towards letting go of the preferencing and just trying to experience everything in a singular fashion. So Payne writes in his question, I look at you here, look at the picture cover, I'll start bawling, how to sustain? Or is sustaining just another grasping here? Well, so sustaining what? What is it that we're actually doing while we're practicing? Are we sustaining just openness with respect to appearance as it arises? That's, fine, like well and good. And yet what happens when we find ourselves preferring the soft to the rough? Right? The Dharma object to the lump of coal. And so what do we do when, that happens, right? It's this kind of like split second. And this is actually it's worth exploring over the course of this next week, is to, for example, as Shabkar points out in this text, is to experiment with that which is soft and that which is rough, that which is lovely and versus that which is ugly. So he uses, look at a beautiful form such as a golden statue and observe your mind that thinks, how lovely. And then look at a repulsive form like a toad. I don't think toads look very repulsive, but I get the point. And observe your mind that thinks, how ugly. When observed, they are both the same taste in being empty. How to cut through preference. How to be able to experience things directly without chasing. Yeah, toads are cute, especially if you like Frog and Toad. My kids both love reading Frog and Toad, and Toad is exceptionally cute in Frog and Toad. So really, what Shabkar is pointing us towards is the experience of, or the practice of the experience of one taste. Now that's actually, kind of a very advanced experience that occurs. So really, when the yoga of one taste arises, that means that we're able to experience everything in the same singular, fashion. So, frog and toad are the same. And it's true, the Yidam picture and the Trump flag, and why I like this instruction is because, it kind of doesn't matter really where our politics are, right? Or what our preferences with respect to things. Times are so divided right now that people have a real hard time being able to approach two things that seem very diametrically opposed as the same. And there's something very samsaric about that. Now, I'm not saying that we have to actively, go hang out with Trump people or go hang out with any kind of people. But what I am suggesting is that we begin to look at where our bias is, right? Where our relationship to preference exists within the way we directly perceive things. Right? So, if we can, just take a moment to close your eyes. Let yourself just get loose, quiet and loose, right? Relaxed. And then open your eyes and just look at everything directly in front of you. And try and allow yourself to experience that almost as if you're experiencing it for the first time. There's not enough kind of jadedness to just let the automatic, assumptions and projections come right up. So, trying to see everything freshly as if for the first time. And then allow yourself to kind of just let everything go and notice whether or not preference is arising. Noticing if there's attachment to particular things versus other things. And I invite you to get curious about why that is, if that's happening. And what it might mean to let that go. Because if we're practicing Tilopa's 6 nails, right, and we're looking at how to let go of past and how to let go of future, how to let go of the very idea of the present, how to let go of doing anything, let go of thinking, examining, and just resting. Why does there always need to be, this battle? So Lorraine writes, maybe the art group tomorrow can contemplate differences in what is considered good or bad in terms of the visual art field. Yeah, or clothes, or language. Oh, that sounds like rough language. I like refined language. That language is refined. Yeah, of course, there's a whole host of complex, social kind of uh, patterns that also arise with respect to what is pleasant language, what is rough language. But rather than kind of harp on the kinds of different projections, what we want to be able to do is cut like a very sharp sword or sharp knife and cut through that impulse to label, the impulse to categorize, the impulse to impose structure, good, bad, high, low, refined, unrefined. You know. Have you ever been in a situation where okay. So Jessica writes, how can we experience one taste in relationship to physical pain? Well, try pinching yourself. Okay, what is that experience that's arising? Right, yes, it's pain. But what else is being experienced within that? Again, the slight discomfort while meditating instantly becomes pain, right? Because you're like, oh, that's uncomfortable. Oh, pain, whoa, you know. And so the question sometimes can become, if we allow ourselves to drop things as they happen, what happens next? You know. So I just pinch myself very hard in both my palms to see what that is like. And what is pain like? What is sour like? I don't like, I mean, I actually don't mind sour. But some people are like, oh, I can't take sour or sweet or bitter. One of my favorite vegetables is bitter gourd, uh, in Hindi Karela. Like it's very very bitter. Kind of almost tastes like bile, but I love it. So like if I'm practicing meditation and someone brings me a plate of like bitter gourd, like I can enjoy that. But if I don't like that, right, then I will taste it and just be like, oh, it's disgusting, right, and then all of a sudden I'm all annoyed. Oh, why'd you give me that? Right. I mean, the same thing like Trump's image comes up on TV. Oh my God! Now I have much different feeling than I did before, right? Or the experience of violent imagery, right, on television. You know, we react, right? And so sometimes it's not actually the fact that we are reacting. It's not that that's inherently problematic, right? Because reacting is just kind of noticing things, noticing pain. Sometimes, you know, I'm still pinching my hand. A severe pain, like a shooting pain associated with like a stomach virus or something. Terrible, right? It's not. It's unpleasant. And yet, while in the moment of experiencing stomach virus pain, can we rest into that and experience it in a more one taste kind of uh, in a one taste kind of way. So why is this important, right? Not just for like being sadists here, or loading up on all the Karela, and eating and eating and eating, or spicy food, or so one of my teachers, Pating Rinpoche, in Sikkim, he's since passed, told me that for 1 year all he did was eat salty food, and then for another year all he did was eat sweet food. Then the next year all he it was stringent food, and he did this to begin to explore this one taste experience, right? The experience of being able to kind of unpack the reactions that arise, like, oh my God, not again. I think 365 days of this, I can't wait for the next thing. So this is a really fascinating way of taking the practice of Mahamudra completely off the cushion, because we're surrounded by all sorts of things, like food of different kinds, physical sensations of different kinds, auditory experiences of different kinds, visual experiences of different kinds. And so when this person was commenting on the story, that was in Time magazine, one of the things that they ended up saying was that they alluded to the fact that they didn't like it because it made them feel very emotional, right? And so, and which is fine, that's their experience, but it also had a slightly kind of negative tone to, oh, I don't want to be experiencing emotional, right? And again, why I really like that comment and why I like this song is because Shabkar is pointing out the fact that ultimately it is us who are creating our own suffering when we feel tossed about in the sea of salty food. For example, oh God, salty, 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 salty. Sometimes it's great, and then other times we're just sick of it. And so it is our own very limited perception that causes a tremendous amount of our relative suffering or displeasure or impatience with respect to being in direct relationship with whatever is arising, when it's arising in a form or an experiential mode that is one that is not preferred. And this is really important because if we can't begin to move into exploring why it is that we're reacting, why it is that I can't stand. It's not that we have to psychoanalyze why we can't stand something, right? But why can't I challenge myself into the experience of confronting, my very limited habitual reaction to things? And instead, why can't I just experience things directly as they arise without judgment? And so there are all sorts of reasons. So I'm going to first get to the text box. So Lorena writes, this makes me think of how white supremacy culture forces acculturation on us with ideas such as a right way to speak things, and things like being direct on challenging issues is somehow wrong. Fear, control, and survival force us to acculturate and unwittingly reinforce dominant norms that do not allow for the fullness of ourselves? What if we learned all this Dharma and learned to accept all of our verbal expressions as valid without judgment? Not sure if that's really possible, but what if? So I totally get what you're saying, Lorena, and I'm also going to push back slightly because I don't think this can just be attributed to white supremacy. This is a very human kind of reaction. I think that this exists in human culture pre, quote unquote, white supremacy. Right? I know that that's a little, uh, hard. When did white supremacy come about, and when did it spread around the world, right? But we find these problems. So these problems are being addressed by Shabkar, right, in 19th century, or 19th century Tibet. But these problems are addressed by medieval Indian thinkers. These problems are very, very, very innate, right? The right way to speak. Right? So in the Indian subcontinent, the right way to speak goes all the way back to, and we find this in our biblical traditions as well. Right? So the right way, right and wrong, good, bad. So this is a very innate kind of human problem, right? And so the question becomes how to break free of this very innate human problem. The way that societies organize themselves, the way that groups organize themselves. Oh, we don't like the color. First color that came to mind was mauve. So no offense to people who like mauve. I actually, I don't mind mauve. But this, not liking, not being able to, even with the Ten Commandments, right? Thou shalt not, you shouldn't, all these things, right? And I'm not advocating for just doing whatever you want, but what I'm advocating for is seeing things for what they are, right? Free from judgment, free from limitation, free from origination, even. They just are. Yeah, and so a significant part of this experience of one taste in Mahamudra is the cultivation of the ability to be able to recognize that things all essentially have the same essence. All things are light. All things have volume. That which appears with use of color. The experience of being in one room, right, in terms of just interacting with the visual field, is not that different than sitting in a forest, is not that different than sitting on the beach, is not that different than sitting in a library, is not that different than sitting on a subway, is not that different than sitting in a spaceship, is not that different than riding on a skateboard. What we see, the actual objects we see may differ, but the process of just being able to directly engage form, light, sound, color is the same. And of course we might have preference. Oh, I'd rather be on a bicycle than I don't know what. I was going to say that riding a wildebeest, but I kind of like to see what riding a wildebeest is like. So this, you know, what if we all learned this Dharma, and learned to accept all of our verbal expressions as valid without judgment? I think that is possible, right? But it requires us to put down our judgments. The very fascinating thing about judgments is judgments become appendages. Right now in this particular form, I only have 2 arms, right? But if I started to add all my judgments, all of a sudden I would have 6 hands, 6 arms. That'd be like this, kind of, half form of varieties of Chakrasamvara. If I had 12 arms of judgment, 2 arms and 10 arms of judgment of identity, male, this, that, tall, you know, uh, I'm building out my identity, building out my form, building out the space I take up, building out the way I want to be known. And Shapkar is really saying, come back to the simplicity of direct experience. Step away from the identity. Step away from the need to be all this stuff, and just be. Because usually we're being all this stuff. Usually we have all of, their 25 arms. Well, you can throw this one right in the middle. So 26 arms of all of our forms, all of our preferences. Usually we take them on because we're scared. Right? We experience fear in relationship to letting them go. So pain. I've been pinching my hands so hard that I still feel, kind of a throbbing in my hands. But I'm not feeling pain. I feel dull pain, I suppose. But what I feel more is kind of heat, right? The throbbing, right? Which has to do with my blood, right? I'm not bleeding, but like the blood pressure. When I try and pinch the same area, it's much more sensitive. Right? So what is pain? Like, where is pain itself? So when I pinch myself, there's a whole host of experiences that's happening. Right? So that one label of pain, right, is much more complex. Right? Even when we look at things like white supremacy, obviously white supremacy is horrible, right? And should be completely, decimated. And on another level, though, like, what is white supremacy? And when we begin to look into these things, it becomes less one thing. Right? It's not only fear. It's not only control. Right? It's not only survival. Right? It's many things. Right? How do we begin to open up into direct experience of fear, so that we can let fear drop away? Let anxiety drop away. So like this what Shabkar. Oh God, I didn't see there were so many comments. So what Shabkar is pointing is the the ultimate oppressor is our mind. Yes, there are ways that we can be we can be oppressed by others. Definitely, I'm not trying to suggest that that's not the case. But when it comes to the way in which we reinforce many of our habitual reactions to the world around us, yes, there can be a cultural cause, and we can point our finger at the culture. And yes, there can be specific familial system or family system, um, causes, and we can point our finger at that. But at a certain point, we need to be able to do the hard work of letting these things dissolve. So anyway, I want to get to this this big thread here. So culture is a big thing. So Anika writes, I'm very surprised by the intensely visceral reaction I'm experiencing at the thought of accepting / resting in the clutter of my children's rooms. Yeah, no, I can totally identify with that. There are such bigger issues to address with the experience of one taste. I hope piles of clothes on the floor doesn't keep me from enlightenment, or Legos on the floor, or kids' homework assignments just being like tossed all about. I agree, and at the same time, if we want to be like technically hard asses, like in the good way, is everything that arises like that becomes a place to practice. And yes, sometimes we can do that, and sometimes we can't. Sometimes it's triggering, and that's okay. The the art of this kind of practice is practicing into that which is where we're examining um, our reactions, right? It's not about, well, like clean room, dirty room, what's the difference? So I'm not going to do anything about it. It's understanding and liberating what's coming up for us in the moment, right? And the liberating is allowing everything to arise, being curious to some extent as to why this patterning is happening. The self-liberation piece is this kind of automatic fusing what is happening with the experience of awareness, right? Awareness not in this kind of like fixated analysis way, but awareness in terms of the spacious container that mind is. Anything that falls into the spacious container of mind is known. By being known, it's experienced and then let go of. Camille writes, maybe that is related to this idea developed by Marshall Rosenberg in his work on nonviolent communication, that human societies having been based on domination for so long, have used the distinctions of good, bad, right, wrong. Yeah, keeping people in check. But I'm going to push back against the maybe societies ultimately the ultimate goal of society is to create order, right? But what the nature of that order has a lot to do with the station of those people who are aiding in the creation of the rules. Again, I think sometimes I think these are great things to look at, and I also think that it's a form of transferring responsibility from the practitioner to the culture or the system within which they live. And so this kind of gets to this idea of, if we created an enlightened society, these problems wouldn't arise. But then the question is, you can't create an enlightened society without becoming enlightened yourself. At which point, the creation of the enlightened society is probably a little bit less likely to happen, right? Because one kind of naturally is a little bit less reactive. So I'm wondering, I'm curious about why the need to find the patterning. Where is the patterning coming from? Rather than, why that is coming into play, rather than just treating it as it arises. The same way I can't tell you the originating point of clouds, but I know that as I see them, when I see them, that's when I experience them, right? The source of all of our kleshas, or our reactivity, like our emotional reactions, right, is ultimately rooted in our relationship to the way things arise and preference, what we can hold and what we can't hold. You know, likes and dislikes drive all blooms into one. It's interesting though, because and I really appreciate and enjoy what's going on in the text box, because really all we're talking about is directly confronting what's arising in front of us, right? And so the question then becomes, whatever is arising for us in this moment, right? So within our field of reference, for example, within our experience of mind, can we allow the resting into that to be the main practice without focusing so much on source, or who put all of these objects in the room? And I mean, I put all these objects in this room, and so did my wife, right? And somebody built the building, and somebody plowed the land, because at some point it was a forest, and somebody, came here from another part of the world. And before that, it was something else. 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 And yet, I'm here in the immediacy of this experience. And all I'm doing, generally, is projecting preference onto everything. Oh, like, don't like, good, bad, small, big. Everything is relational. Everything is contextually based. It's very difficult to be able to experience two separate things in the same time without reactivity arising. Right? Letting things be. And this is hard. This is hard in these times in particular. It's hard because these times, almost as if it feels as if they ask us to pick a side. Right? Are you mauve or are you teal? And the fact is that we're everything, right? We're much more than any particular one thing, right? So when, as we see in the text, listen to the music of the bell, sitar, or flute, and observe your mind that thinks, how melodious. And listen to the sounds of stones or hands clapping together, and observe your mind that thinks, how harsh. So our judgment on sound. Sound is invisible. Sound just arises. Right? We experience it. I hate that sound. I mean, I definitely don't have some. There are sounds I'm not that fond of, but so, and I'm very gently pushing back, Lorena. Your point is good. Likes and dislikes are also about survival. For instance, bitter, rotten pain, um, etc., are ways to know what may harm us. Can I speak to the distinction of knowing that although we do well to let things be, we still need to know not to eat poison or put our hands on fire? Possibly. I mean, obviously not literally, but I think that's the that. So this is where the fear part comes in. Well, if I let go of everything, then I'll probably eat something and die. If I let go of, you know, this kind of relational, judgmental process that happens, I'll probably kill someone. If I let go of, you know, good and bad, then am likely to just spin out of control. And that is something that's very interesting to look at as well. Like, why? Why is that the case? I'm pretty sure nobody here, if they were to experience an absence of good or bad, would go out and start hurting people. And yet that's a very common concern. I mean, not just in this particular group, but this is something I hear often. And again, I think that still falls right back into the same system of, well, surely you're not saying I should eat poison. So these fears are worth looking at. What happens when we're scared? Do we contract? You know, when we contract, we fall out of relationship, or we become small, we become distant. Right? Fear is isolating. Right? Sometimes that isolation is a way of bolstering ourselves. Well, surely I can't do that because then I'll give all my money away. Well, nobody was talking about giving money away. Surely I can't do that because I'll lose my job. Surely I can't do that because, you know, exactly. It's all about the I. And that's why with, this yoga of one taste is experienced, relatively far into the practice of Mahamudra, because at that point the I, the self, begins to melt away. The sense of separation between self and other. And I know people who are viscerally react against that. Don't talk to me about separation between self and other, because that sounds to me like the most terrible thing. If to melt away any sense of difference sounds horrible. Like I've heard people say that. And of course it sounds horrible. Yourself is going away. Of course you're going to react. And of course your sense of centrality, sense of importance, sense of being special, right, feels like it's dying. But it's not dying. Actually, what's ending up happening is that experience becomes directly engaged in such a profoundly open way that we're able to experience things with less judgment, less, thought interference, and everything becomes much more vivid. But what we think is going to happen is that, we're going to disappear. We're going to go crazy. And so that's this interesting kind of secondary fear response. So I want to get to the question box. So Melissa writes, is the method for doing this, teaching a state of non-preference, is to do Mahamudra practice as you've recommended? Does it help to do it in a non-meditation state? Are there any other techniques that are helpful in waking life. So everything we experience, you know, experiencing what's happening while we're on the phone, something intense might happen, right? Understanding that I'm experiencing sound. And of course, the words that are touching my eardrum are causing cognitive response. And those words have meaning, right? But if I'm going to fly into a depression as a result of the call, or fly into a rage, be very kind of, reactive, and all we were doing was being on the phone. Touching, tasting, smelling, being really tired. What's that like? So you can walk through space, walk through our entire experience of life, and have things to practice with. Right? So it helps if we can kind of keep a little bit of a like twofold practice going on. Some sitting meditation on the cushion to allow us to be able to especially go deeper into the practice of shamatha and vipassana, right? Because we need that ability to remain focused, right, and spacious, right? But you can think of the cushion practice as kind of quote unquote classical practice, and then we're moving around the world, right, or moving around in whatever form we're moving around in these days. Then we do that openly, directly. I'm very excited about Thanksgiving because we're gonna go visit some friends who live in a couple neighborhoods away, and they're people that we've been in kind of, they're in our like whatever COVID pod or something. But one of the people is gonna make fruit soup, and part of me is like, you make the fruit soup, I'm gonna bring my Mahamudra practice and see what happens to the ingestion of fruit soup. I have no idea what it is that they're making. So, and then with respect to reaching a state of non-preference, yeah, everything. Read a very dry Dharma book, and then read a very lively Dharma book, and then read a book about dogs, and then read a dictionary, and then read something upside down. Yes, sweet. You're gonna have to explain to me fruit soup. But just to engage, hot, cold, good, bad, sweet, sour, like, and play and play and play and play. Like Dharma practice isn't, I like fruit salad too. Sometimes it's nice for things to have, a, this contrast, right, between things. You so just staying in the question box, can we still enjoy something while tasting its emptiness? Yes, absolutely. Have you ever been in an experience where you're breaking up with somebody and it's kind of a slow breakup, and you know that after this time when I don't see, after this time that we leave this particular moment where we're in the process of breaking up and it's amicable, that we're still going to spend time together, right? Even though when we leave this space, the relationship will be forever changed. You can still enjoy that, right? Emptiness, emptiness has nothing really to do with the removal of experience. Ice cream is empty, and you can still taste sweet. Fruit soup is empty, and you can taste. Actually, yes, thank you, Lorena. Gazpacho is fruit soup. So, tasting its emptiness is tasting the impermanence, tasting the spaciousness, tasting the profound clarity of something, right? Tasting how vivid something is. Because emptiness is not a negation. Emptiness is an understanding of the true nature of things. You know, does that make sense? I'm not seeing a name on that one. And then Jarrett. Oh, Lucy. Yes. Hopefully that was helpful, Lucy. Can you speak a little bit about the difference between realization and experience as it pertains to the first bhumi, beginning of bodhisattva activity? I know there are a lot of different ways of looking at attainments, and I'm curious what my stance is. I know some Theravadan practitioners who label stream entry first bhumi with the first cessation / glimpse of emptiness. Strikes me as dangerous to make these claims when there's still the karma of solidification and judgment. Hold on one second. Oh, sorry about that. So I disappeared. Um, so this is this is a good question. You know, I so my personal stance on this is that I tend not to um, think about these things that much. I know this might be a little bit of a disappointment, but I um, I'm a little less concerned with the formalities of measuring like boomies. Probably because I'm not, I don't have any real good like qualifications or skills or qualities, and that for me the cultivation of the experience of mind that is free and free of the structuralism of the tradition is important. That's more important to me um, than comparisons between traditions, um, especially with respect to the boomies. So um, I've never really been um, quite interested in that. Um, so I think the thing is that yeah, it's just never been a concern of mine. So I haven't really spent time, looking at attainments and looking at the different bhumi distinctions because technically, you know, very stable shamatha, very stable shamatha, right? Is they say is the equivalent to experience of the first bhumi. Um, I wouldn't presume to be able to know what the first bhumi actually feels like in real life. And I kind of like, it's kind of like my kids. I mean, it's a horrible game because it's very kind of binary, right? But the game of life. um, my kids have discovered that, and so they've been playing. And I think I like to take the tack of rather than worrying about where I end up, with respect to winning the game, I'll go through the whole board as best I can and collect as many pieces and whatnot as I can, and then see when I die. Does that make sense? The active tracking, for some reason, for me, seems to add, um, seems to cut the spontaneity of the practice. Because again, while systems of measuring progress can be important, right? So, like in the Tibetan tradition, we have Lamrim literature, right? Stages and the stages and paths. The truth of the situation is that the mind experience of mind is not that way, right? The experience of mind is not, to be experienced like going up steps. It's like going up a step, and then the next step is actually an elevator, and then the step after that is an escalator down, and the step after that is, it's not as linear as a set of bhumis. I think even the whole conception of bhumi levels is really a form of artifice used to try to quantify attainment, and success with respect to the way practice is going. But I'm not sure, like, from the perspective of Ati Yoga, labeling all the bhumis is not even really necessary, right? From the perspective of Mahamudra, especially if the practice is uh, uh, essence Mahamudra, kind of coming from the Maitrepa, Gempopa, Saraha kind of models, then some of these things aren't relevant. And then, with respect to kind of tantric Mahamudra, the yogas and all of that, um, one's time is better spent in being able to cultivate the experience of clear, light, or illusory body, um, rather than kind of coming back to things like this. So I hope, I say that with like the most amount of love for the question, because it is a good question, but it's just not where I'm at. So hopefully, I hope you can hear that. Okay. But yeah, so we're right at time, and I'm sorry about fading out like that. Um, but so I would encourage people to go through the next week, and I'm going to do the same thing, and we can compare notes, and we'll the next time we'll have this group is right after Thanksgiving, so I will have brought Mahamudra to fruit soup, and all sorts of things, many of which other people are making that I'm completely unfamiliar with. So maybe there'll be things that Shabkar would ask me to say are nasty, and I'll eat them and imbibe them and bring that to practice. Um, and the but the most important thing is for us to be able to take this, again, off the cushion into every experience. Sound consciousness, visual consciousness, olfactory consciousness, you know, touch consciousness, right? Feeling everything, feeling the elements, interacting with the elements, and bringing everything back to this direct experience, and direct experience in a way that is rooted in the cultivation of awareness that's not localized and not fabricated, so that it is the spontaneous arising knowing. So if it makes sense to do that, please do that, and then we'll check in next Friday. So get your butt off the cushion. I want to thank you all for showing up and being here, and your patience with me and all my imperfections. And I'd like to dedicate any merit from this particular session to the cessation of all beings, cessation of the suffering of all beings. All beings will eventually they will cease in and of themselves. But especially, I dedicate this to the skillful application of Mahamudra, so that all experience can be able to be experienced freely, without judgment, without reactivity, in a way that is fresh, direct, vivid, and perhaps even undulating. So, thank you all for your time and your practice, and I'll see you soon.